Satoru is a 29-year-old young man, and his main job is a manga artist, but his works are not highly regarded because they lack soul. Therefore, Satoru has to work an additional job as a pizza delivery driver, where he meets a cute coworker named Eri. During a delivery, while lost in random thoughts, Satoru notices a glowing butterfly flying by, and suddenly he is transported back in time 5 minutes. Due to his past experiences with this phenomenon, he knows that something ominous is about to happen. He focuses and finds out a truck driver with suspicious behavior. Satoru immediately chases after it and discovers the truck driver dozing off, heading straight towards a boy crossing the street. After a frantic effort, he successfully saves the boy, but gets hit by an oncoming car in the process. In his dazed state, he revisits his childhood and encounters a young girl standing alone and saying peculiar things. 2 days later, Satoru wakes up and finds Eri sitting next to him. She recounts the events of the incident because she was also present at the scene the other day. Eri tries to make him laugh as he always wears a gloomy expression. They continue talking for a while until Eri has to leave for work. A few days later, Satoru recovers from his injuries and recalls the phenomenon of the glowing butterfly, which he calls revival. It sends him back in time 5 minutes to witness the current events. Thanks to this ability, Satoru has prevented several accidents, but sometimes he experiences adverse outcomes instead of the intended victims. On that evening, Satoru returns home and meets his mother, who had gone to the city to visit her son. She decides to stay for a few more days to take care of him. That night, while preparing for bed, they watch the news about recent child disappearances, triggering a memory in Satoru's mother. She asks him about the kidnapping incident that happened near their house when he was in 5th grade. Faint memories resurface. Satoru recalls a boy named Jun, who used to talk with him and encourage him to be more sociable with other friends. However, only 6 months after the mysterious kidnapping incident, Jun was convicted of abduction and murder. Back in the present, while Satoru and his mother are shopping, he experiences another revival and is immediately taken back 5 minutes. His mother, aware of this phenomenon, helps Satoru observe their surroundings to find anything unusual. She quickly spots a suspicious man and manages to capture his car's license plate. On their way back, they run into Eri, and Satoru's mother invites her to their house, to which Eri agrees without hesitation. From a distance, the suspicious men are observing them. That night, Eri and Satoru have dinner together with his mother. After finishing the meal, Eri asks to go home, and Satoru drives her to the train station. When he returns home, his mother reminds him of the morning incident. She suspects that there was an attempted kidnapping at that time. The next morning, Satoru investigates the past kidnapping case and recalls the girl he met in his dream, Ko, his classmate. On March 1st, she was kidnapped and murdered. After the kidnapping, Satoru believed that Jun was not the culprit and regretted leaving Ko alone that night. While his mother is out shopping, she suddenly realizes something related to the kidnappings back then. She immediately starts researching to confirm her hypothesis. After connecting the events, she finally identifies the real culprit. When she returns home, she plans to tell Satoru everything but is suddenly attacked from behind by a stranger. In her last breaths, she remembers Satoru and feels guilty for not believing him. Meanwhile, Satoru finishes his work and prepares to go home. As he approaches his house, he passes by a stranger. Upon entering his house, he witnesses his mother lying motionless. In a state of panic, he is misunderstood by a neighbor, and the police promptly arrive, demanding his arrest. Refusing to accept the truth, he runs away, and revival takes him back in time again, but this time, he goes back 18 years ago. He sees himself going back to his old school days, meeting his old homeroom teacher and classmates. Suddenly, Satoru realizes something and rushes home. Opening the door, his familiar old house remains the same. His mother is also there. Seeing her alive, he's deeply moved. While having dinner with his mother, tears well up in Satoru's eyes. Revival has given him a second chance to relive these beautiful days, and he is determined to change the future to save his mother. The next day, he goes to school as usual and unexpectedly sees a familiar figure, Ko, the girl who was kidnapped in his memories. Satoru observes her and notices bruises on her body. After school, he hangs out and talks with his old friends, including Kenya, an intelligent and calm boy, Hiromi, an adorable boy who resembles a girl, Kazu, a chubby and brave boy, and finally Osamu, an innocent and friendly boy. They believe that Satoru likes KO because they notice that he has been staring at her all morning, so Kazu arranges for him to meet KO after school. When Satoru meets KO, he expresses his desire to be friends with her. But she remains indifferent, believing that everything in the world is fake, including Satoru. The next day, Satoru continues going to school as usual, and when he goes home with his friends, he says strange things that catch Kenya's attention. That night, Satoru finds an old essay written by KO, where she expresses her desire to go somewhere far away alone, a place where she can escape negativity and do things she likes. Satoru realizes it's a cry for help and decides to learn more about her. He believes this will create a butterfly effect and change his future. The next day, after school, he bids farewell to his friends and actively searches for KO. Suspecting that she might be suffering from abuse at home, he finds her standing alone in the park. And she still maintains her indifferent attitude towards him. However, when she hears sincere words from him, she's slightly moved. Satoru invites her to his upcoming birthday on February 3rd. After a moment of hesitation, she agrees. After talking for a while, she has to go home. But Satoru remains there and promises himself that he will save her no matter what. KO was kidnapped before turning 11, which means she disappeared between today and her birthday. Today, Satoru's class has ice skating practice, and he will have to compete against a friend who has participated in national competitions in the sport. When Satoru's classmates predicted that he would lose badly to his friend, KO encouraged him. Thanks to her support, he competed fiercely, and although he lost, it helped him remember something. On the way home, Satoru tried to approach KO to ask about her birthday, but she suddenly became cold and walked away. Satoru decided to go to the teacher's room to find out on his own. With the help of Mr. Yashiro, he discovered that KO's birthday coincided with his own, on February 3rd. Today is February 19th, just 11 days before their birthdays, which is also when the kidnapping occurred. In the evening, Satoru accidentally met Jun and was invited to his house. Through their conversation, Satoru learned that Jun was a shy person but very kind-hearted. Satoru then said goodbye to Jun and intended to go to KO's house. On the way, he was determined to clarify everything and clear Jun's name. Upon reaching KO's house, he discovered that the belongings were scattered around, and by following the trail, he found KO lying motionless with numerous injuries. While KO cried helplessly, her mother appeared, pushing Satoru aside and dragging KO into the house. In a fit of anger, Satoru asked KO about the reason for her injuries. But under her mother's threat, she could only lie to him that she fell down and then leave. After getting home, she continues to be subjected to violence by her mother. The next day, KO went to school as usual with more and more injuries. Satoru immediately reported everything he had witnessed to Mr. Yoshida, but it turned out that Mr. Yoshida had already known about it for a while. However, he was powerless because every time he called the child welfare center to intervene at KO's house, her mother would run away. At noon, Satoru discovered that he had lost the class's shared lunch money. A nearby classmate named Misato suspected that KO had stolen it because she was too poor and even lacked money for lunch. She then decided to conduct a search of classmates' backpacks to find out the truth. Satoru could only grit his teeth and listen to her. Suddenly, KO calmly said that she found the lost money, and the whole class began to mock and ridicule her following the lead of Misato. Unable to take it anymore, Satoru spoke up, believing that although KO was poor, she would never do such things. Luckily, Mr. Yoshida intervened in time, and the situation was temporarily resolved. While taking out the trash with KO, she thanked him. Satoru then gave her a new pair of gloves and promised to take her to see the Christmas tree. On the way back home, Satoru held KO's hand and took her to a snowy hill where she witnessed the best beautiful scene for the first time in her life. Holding KO's hand tightly, Satoru promised to bring her back here on Christmas Day. Satoru's memories resurfaced on the night KO was kidnapped, which was March 1st. He unintentionally noticed Jun sitting quietly by the lake, and at that moment, KO wasn't standing alone in the park as usual. Connecting with reality, Satoru believed that if he could ensure a peaceful March 1st, the future would change. On the morning of February 25th, during breakfast, Satoru asked his mother if he could go out with his friends over the weekend, including KO. And the reason behind this action is to help KO avoid being abused. Later, he invited his friends to hang out, but they declined because they want him to have the opportunity to be alone with KO. Satoru then went to meet Keio's mother to ask for permission, but she seemed angry because Keio wanted to go out with him. When she was about to slap Keio, Satoru's mother intervened in time and stopped her. Out of respect for Satoru's mother, she reluctantly let the matter pass and went inside. As a result of that event, Keio suffered less abuse, and she was even allowed to go out with Satoru on the weekend. They went out together, and in a moment, Satoru realized that history was repeating itself. He had experienced this scene 18 years ago. That meant he hadn't changed anything. The next morning, Keio came to school in a happier mood than usual, which was a good sign because the kidnapping would happen tomorrow night. Satoru escorted her home that evening and promised to pick her up early the next morning. True to his promise, he arrived at Keio's house very early to pick her up. Satoru believed that the reason Keio was targeted was because she was always alone, so he decided to be by her side whenever possible. They stopped by the park where Keio used to stand alone. Satoru felt happy that she wasn't alone anymore. Time continued to pass, events slowly unfolded, and tonight the kidnapping would take place. After escorting Keio home, Satoru anxiously waited for each second to pass, hoping that history would change. In the middle of that night, Satoru went to Keio's house alone to check, and finally, a new day arrived. He succeeded. The next morning, he rushed to Keio's house to check on her. Luckily, she was safe. They spent the day together, running errands and shopping. When they returned home, everyone surprised them with a birthday celebration. Keio expressed regret because she hadn't finished preparing a birthday gift for Satoru. The party then followed was joyful, and Keio was deeply moved by that. Satoru gave her a pair of gloves and escorted her home. Keio thanked him and promised to give him a gift the next day. Believing that he had changed history, Satoru was extremely happy, and that night he finally could sleep peacefully. The next morning, Satoru went to school as usual, but Keio didn't show up. That meant the history had not changed yet. After school, Satoru hurriedly ran to Keio's house to check on her, but she was missing. The scene leaves only strange footprints behind. 2 days later, news of Keio's disappearance spread, and Satoru saw his mother talking to a man whom he believed to be from a television station. His mother encouraged him for his efforts in taking care of Keio during that time and advised him to go back to school to regain his spirits the next day. The following morning, Mr. Yoshida attempts to conceal Keio's disappearance from the students by telling a different story to avoid causing panic, and he advised Satoru not to do anything foolish until there is a conclusion from the police. Keio's mother was questioned as the prime suspect, and in the subsequent days, other disappearances occurred and were also covered up. Thanks to the keen perception, Kenya began to realize that something was amiss, knowing that this was a series of abductions. Time continued to pass, and 10 days later, Satoru accidentally witnessed Keio's mother discarding something with a wicked smile. When he approached to investigate, Satoru was shocked to discover that it was a half-finished birthday gift that Keio had prepared for him the other night. In his shock, he unintentionally returned to reality, with the police still pursuing him. While exhausted and hungry, he received a text message, which turned out to be from his pizza workplace manager. The manager invited Satoru to his home and treated him to a meal. They conversed, and the manager appeared quite friendly. Suddenly, the manager asked for permission to step outside to buy beer. While waiting, Satoru overheard the police hunting him and had a premonition that something was awry. He immediately checked and found his manager reporting to the police. Satoru swiftly escaped and accidentally encountered Eri, and she proactively offered him a ride home despite knowing that he was evading the police. Back at home, they sat down to talk. Eri believed that Toru was not the killer of that crime. She then returned the forgotten newspaper Satoru left at work, flipping back to the old case, and Satoru noticed that history had slightly changed. The next morning, Eri had gone to work to avoid suspicion, leaving a note for Satoru allowing him to use her motorcycle and phone. At the pizza workplace, the manager was talking to a mysterious man, and when he saw Eri returning, he watched her as if plotting something. Returning to Satoru, he was investigating recent abductions to find a lead. When he arrived home, he was discovered by the manager, who was about to report him to the police, but Eri intervened. She expressed disappointment in his actions and left. Since he was exposed by the manager, Satoru had to flee to another location. He asked Eri why she trusted him. She then recalled her past when her father was suspected of petty theft in a supermarket. Eri believed he was innocent because she had observed everything, but he was fired by the local management for not admitting guilt. Devastated, he left home. Ever since then, she has always felt empathy for those betrayed, which is why she trusted Satoru. Satoru advised her to go home to avoid ruining her reputation, but she insisted on helping him. While preparing clothes for Satoru, she received a strange message, and shortly after, her house erupted in a fierce fire, leaving her unconscious. Satoru immediately arrived at the scene and heard that Eri was still inside. He quickly rushed straight into the flames to save her. Amidst the intense fire, Satoru saw her lying motionless on the second floor. He quickly helped her out of the fire. While feeling helpless because she was too heavy, the manager appeared and assisted him in getting Eri out. At the main gate, the manager instructed Satoru to escape through the back door to avoid being found out. While contemplating Eri and the cause of the fire, Satoru began to suspect that she was being followed by the culprit. The next morning, Satoru called a man and arranged to meet him. When he arrived at the meeting point, he encountered the man, who turned out to be Sawada, the person who had previously spoken to his mother back then. Sawada believed that the real culprit was not Satoru and encouraged him not to blame himself. Recalling the conversation between Sawada and his mother on the afternoon when she was murdered, she mentioned knowing who the culprit was and planned to meet Sawada the following day to talk about it. He reiterated the case of Keio's murder, stating that on the night of March 2nd, Keio was abused by her mother and locked in a warehouse. Later, she disappeared from the warehouse between 10 and p.m. Jun was convicted for kidnapping her because the police found his shoe prints near the warehouse. A complete scenario could be reconstructed as follows. The culprit knocked out Keio and placed her in a freezer, then used an atomizer to expedite the death process. After 30 minutes, Keio was completely dead. The culprit returned her to the warehouse and disappeared. Sawada believed that all the past disappearances were the crime of one person who was still in the city. Based on the clues they had gathered, Satoru believed that this person had come to his workplace and asked Eri about his work schedule to easily frame him. Sawada then decided to go to Eri's place for more information, but upon arrival, he found her mother lying in bed instead of Eri. She had disguised herself as Eri to facilitate Eri's meeting with Satoru. After leaving the hospital, Eri immediately arranged to meet Satoru to talk. After arriving at the meeting point and waiting for a while, Satoru encountered Eri again. She still seemed to trust him after everything that had happened. Eri mentioned the unknown man who frequently met the manager, using a fake name and not appearing on the list of suspects. After confiding in Eri for a while, Satoru silently thanked her for helping him. Suddenly, the police appeared out of nowhere and arrested him. He was convicted as the murderer of his mother. Based on Eri's demeanor, it can be concluded that she was not the one who reported to the police. After all, Satoru thanked her for trusting him, and as he was being taken away, he caught sight of a man whose gaze was identical to the one he saw the other night. In a moment of helplessness, he screamed, and then, revival was activated. He returned to the time when he was with Keio, unable to hide his emotions, and cried tears of joy. This was his final revival, and he was determined to succeed at all costs. On February 29th, just one day before the kidnapping incident, everything unfolded as usual. While out playing, Kenya arranged to meet Satoru for a private conversation. It turned out that he had noticed Satoru's recent change in personality and inquired about his true identity. Impressed by his best friend's intelligence and perceptiveness, Satoru decided to reveal everything to Kenya. After hearing the story, Kenya resolved to help him. Due to their conversation, both of them arrived late to class and were punished with carrying buckets of water. After school, Satoru sought out Jun to ask for some information. Based on his response, Satoru could confidently conclude that Jun was not the culprit. Time continued to pass, and on his birthday night, Satoru quietly asked for permission to go outside. He went to Jun's house and slashed the tires of his truck, then broke the window to make him call the police, turning the reluctant police officers into witnesses for Jun that night. On his way back, he encountered Keio's mother and planned to eliminate her to protect Keio. Fortunately, Kenya arrived in time and stopped him, expressing concern for his impulsive solo actions. Satoru then came up with a bold plan and asked for Kenya's help, to which he agreed. After the party ended, it was expected that Satoru would take Keio home, but tonight, he would take her somewhere else to spend the night safely. Satoru led her to an abandoned bus, and Kenya was also present. It turned out to be Satoru and Kenya's plan, creating Keio's disappearance for a few days to bring about a significant change. After cleaning up, They created a cozy space with all the necessary amenities. Satoru and Kenya then asked for permission to go home to avoid suspicion. Satoru's mother was still at home, waiting for him and noticing his unusual behavior. In the middle of that night, Satoru sneaked out and met Ko, who was still awake. They had dinner together and opened up to each other, and Ko started to open her heart to him. The next morning, Ko was still peacefully sitting in the old bus, and everything proceeded as usual. From now on, everything would unfold in a completely different way, and Satoru had to adapt to that. On the following evening, everyone gathered around the bus, talking to Ko, and she appeared very happy about it. That night, a stranger unexpectedly broke into the bus while Ko was sleeping, leaving behind a bag and creating a loud noise that startled Kazo. However, eventually, the intruder left. The next morning, while having breakfast with Satoru, Ko's mother asked about his secret, but he refused to answer. She then gave him a portion of food to take away, and Satoru quickly ran to Ko's location and gave her the lunchbox. While eating, Ko discovered a piece of paper from Satoru's mother, revealing that she had already known about this and instructed Ko to eat properly. At school, the students began discussing Ko's recent absences. Mr. Yoshida told Satoru that he had been trying to contact Ko's mother in recent days, but received no response, so he contacted the Child Welfare Center, and they would visit Ko's house today, which made Satoru feel very happy. That evening, the staff from the Child Welfare Center arrived at Ko's house, but her mother quickly fled. Meanwhile, in the old bus, Satoru was recounting the results to his friends. Ko gave him a pair of gloves as a belated birthday gift. Satoru was deeply moved because, after all the effort, he was able to change the future. Ko then recounted the events of the previous night and led everyone to the bag left by the man. When they opened it, Satoru was shocked to find that it contained only weapons used to kill Ko the other night. Realizing that this place was no longer safe, Satoru decided to take Ko somewhere else. After finishing the cleanup, Satoru brought the entire group back to his home, as Satoru's mother had already known the secret and gently comforted Ko. Inviting the group inside, they were treated to a curry meal. After Kenya and Hiromi left, Satoru's mother called Mr. Yashiro, indicating that they were aware that Satoru would bring Ko home and were preparing a plan. That night, Ko was cared for by Satoru's mother in a tender manner. Perhaps this was the first time in her life that she received such a warm care like this. Another night passed quietly, and dawn arrived again. Satoru's mother woke up early and prepared food for the two of them. Seeing the well-prepared meal that Satoru's mother had made, Ko remembered the meals she had when she was with her own mother, which consisted only of bread and instant noodles. Tears automatically welled up in her eyes, and she burst into uncontrollable sobs. Returning to Ko's mother, when her daughter back, she was angry and intended to slap Kazo, but Satoru's mother appeared. She then was furious and constantly blamed Satoru's mother, even actively attacking her. While Ko tried to restrain her mentally unstable mother, a staff member from the Child Welfare Center arrived. It turned out that Satoru's mother and Mr. Yashiro had planned for the center's staff to meet and talk directly with Ko's mother. They decided to take Ko back to the childcare center due to her indifference to her daughter's disappearance for the past 3 days, as the mother pulled Ko away, refusing to accept the conclusion from the center's staff. Ko's grandmother appeared and apologized for leaving Ko's mother alone for all this time. The reason for Ko's mother's cruelty was also revealed. Since childhood, she had been brutally abused by her father, causing severe psychological trauma. Therefore, she had done the same thing to Ko. Ko's mother then hugged her mother tightly and burst into tears. From now on, Ko will be safe under the care of her grandmother, Satoru silently thought. Ko then thanked Satoru and bid him farewell. Standing under the snowy sky, he silently wished the best for Ko. According to Satoru's memory, the next victims would be Hiromi and Aya, two classmates of his. His mission now was to befriend them and not let them be alone. The next day, he began to investigate Aya and Hiromi's daily schedules. While observing Aya, he was asked by his mother to carry some luggage, so he had to abandon the surveillance halfway. Fortunately, they met Mr. Yoshida and he gave them a ride home. Through their conversation in the car, we learned that Mr. Yoshida didn't have a family. In a moment of distraction, Satoru accidentally opened a small drawer and discovered a lot of candies. It turned out that due to his smoking addiction, Mr. Yoshida had to chew candies to suppress his craving for cigarettes. The next afternoon, after school, Kenya arranged to meet Satoru to inquire about his strange behavior despite saving KO. Satoru then had to reveal his secret to Kenya once again, and Kenya would continue to stand by his side to find the true culprit. They then went to the old bus to find clues. Here, Satoru recounted his entire deduction to Kenya and Hiromi, from the connection between KO's abuse to the series of disappearances, and Kenya showed great understanding. That evening, Satoru escorted Hiromi home to ensure his safety. The next evening, Satoru, Kenya, and Hiromi took the initiative to approach and introduce themselves to Iya. She quickly recognized them because she often saw them sneaking into a warehouse, which was supposed to be Satoru and his friend's secret base. Iya teased Satoru and Kenya, calling them children for playing games of a secret base, and then left. Suddenly, Kazu appeared and invited her to visit the secret base, but only to scare her into running away. The next day, while Satoru and his friends were gathering at the secret base, Iya showed up. It turned out she was also curious about the place and had come looking for it. In the following days, they continued to have fun together, and both Iya and Hiromi were no longer lonely. They were safe. However, Satoru remained worried because he had lost all the leads on the culprit. One evening, while walking Hiromi home, Hiromi mentioned to Satoru about Masato, who had been isolating herself since the incident of the stolen money the other day. Seeing that, Satoru planned to talk to her the next day. The next morning, Satoru was unsure how to approach Masato when she suddenly boarded a bus. With the information from Hiromi, he knew her destination and immediately chased after her, eventually finding her at a sports arena. Teacher Yoshida was also present there, cheering for his students. After observing, he noticed Masato sitting alone. She later went to the restroom, and after waiting for her for a while without seeing her come out, Satoru approached to check. Suddenly, Teacher Yoshida appeared and said that Masato had already gone home. In his state of confusion, Satoru noticed Jun's father's car wandering around, so he asked Yoshida to chase after it. Inside the car, Satoru recounted to Yoshida about the possibility of Hiromi being the target of a serial killer, and Yoshida showed admiration for what he had done. Suddenly, Yashiro's behavior became strange, continuously talking about extreme ideals, about humanity, and death. When the car entered a tunnel, he began revealing his true nature. He was the one responsible for all the series of disappearances, which Satoru had been trying to prevent. He had orchestrated everything just to trap Satoru. Satoru remembered it all. He recognized the face of the person who had killed his mother. He took Satoru to a lakeside, and despite his efforts, Satoru couldn't escape. After the final threats, he let Satoru and the car plunge into the river. The scene shifts to 18 years later. Finally, Satoru wakes up from his 15-year coma. During his unconscious state, Satoru's mother was always by his side, taking care of him. Thanks to her extraordinary efforts, he was able to wake up today. Although it seems that his memories have temporarily been lost, the next day, Kenya and Hiromi come to visit him. Both have grown up and have stable jobs. They chat for a while and bid farewell in the evening. The following day, after a physical rehabilitation training session, a familiar figure appears. It is Kazo. She now has a child and her husband is Hiromi. Although Satoru doesn't remember anything, she thanks him because she has a happy life now, all thanks to him. Satoru smiles with contentment, and they say goodbye to each other. That night, Satoru expresses his desire to regain his mobility quickly, so he wants to intensify his physical rehabilitation training. In the subsequent days, he continues to train hard. During a break, he notices a girl sitting alone. So he takes the initiative to start a conversation. After a while, he learns that her name is Kumi, and she was about to have an important surgery. Satoru then encourages her to strive to overcome the difficulty. Suddenly, a familiar face appears. It is Mr. Yoshida, but Satoru no longer has any memories of him. In the evening, he visits Satoru's hospital room and talks to him. After a while, he wishes Satoru a speedy recovery and leaves. A few days later, while Satoru is planning to visit Kumi, Mr. Yoshida appears and indicates that he doesn't want him to visit. He then says that he wants to talk to Satoru privately and leads him to the rooftop. Once there, Satoru surprises him by saying that he remembers everything. A few days ago, during a conversation with Satoru, Kenya discovered that Satoru had regained his memory and desired to help him resolve the whole incident once and for all. Satoru suddenly remembered the friends who had helped him in the past, and now they would continue to stand by each other's side to find out the truth. Back in reality, Yashiro revealed the plan to kill Kumi, which had been arranged to frame Satoru. He continuously threatened and provoked Satoru. Suddenly, Satoru regained his inherent confidence. He believed that Yashiro was the one failing in this game because Satoru had saved everyone from him. Yashiro had waited 15 years just for the day Satoru woke up, meaning he needed him, and Satoru was his reason for living. After speaking, Satoru rushed towards the railing to commit suicide. But Yashiro held him back, proving that what Satoru said was correct. Yashiro couldn't kill him, because Satoru was the only one who understood Yashiro as a person. For Satoru, the past 15 years felt like a blink of an eye. But for Yashiro, he had to endure each day, waiting for the day Satoru woke up. Yashiro finally accepted defeat and let him go. He planned to commit suicide right after. Suddenly, he saw that Satoru was still alive, lying on a mattress prepared by Satoru's mother and his friends. Realizing that he had been deceived, Yashiro could only laugh helplessly. The police arrived shortly after and took him into custody, ending the 18-year-long case. The old editor praised Satoru's work wholeheartedly because now, his soul was fulfilled, and since that day, Satoru never experienced revival again. And that was the recap of the anime series named Erased. If you enjoyed it, hit the like and subscribe button to support me. What is your favorite character in this anime series, or what topic that you want me to do next? Don't forget to let me know in the comment section. Thank you.